The year 1040 brings us to the tangled borderlands between Bavaria and Bohemia, a region where the trees stand closer together than the chronicler's accounts. Here lies the Brůdek Pass, a narrow, wooded corridor that has thwarted more ambitions than any imperial decree. Henry, not yet crowned emperor, but already behaving as though the world were his footstool, marched into these forests expecting obedience. What he found instead was Bretislaus I, Duke of Bohemia, and a landscape that had no intention of cooperating. Bohemia under Bretislaus had grown assertive, even adventurous, after his campaigns in Poland. The empire, meanwhile, expected dutiful submission, an expectation that had not been met since the days when saints walked barefoot through Prague. Henry sought to reassert imperial authority. Bretislaus sought to demonstrate that Bohemia was no mere appendage. Thus the conflict was less about territory and more about dignity, pride, and the perennial imperial fantasy of bringing order east of the Bavarian frontier. Henry's host was Bavarian heavy, confident, and entirely too large for the terrain it attempted to traverse. Chroniclers praise his resolve, which is usually a polite way of saying he ignored every warning. Bretislaus's forces, by contrast, were lighter, quicker, and intimately familiar with the passes. They had no intention of meeting the Empire in open battle. They intended to let the hills and forests do most of the work. On the 22nd of August, Henry's army pushed into the Brůdek Pass. They found it obstructed, fortified, and lined with Bohemian troops who had spent the previous week preparing every inconvenience known to man. The imperial columns were squeezed into narrow ground, harassed from above, and forced to advance at a crawl. Supplies lagged, tempers frayed, horses questioned their life choices. By the second day, the situation had deteriorated. The Bohemians struck with sudden counterattacks, exploiting every ridge and ravine. Henry's men could neither advance nor properly deploy. The forest swallowed their formations, and the slopes turned every maneuver into a laborious ordeal. At last, with losses mounting and no breakthrough in sight, Henry ordered a retreat, a rare imperial admission of defeat. Bretislaus emerged triumphant. His strategy had worked precisely as intended. Avoid open battle, bleed the imperial advance, and let the terrain punish Henry's overconfidence. The victory secured Bohemia's borders and enhanced Bretislaus's prestige. For a moment, a brief shining moment, Bohemia stood as the master of its own destiny, unbowed before the empire. Yet the triumph was not final. Henry withdrew to Regensburg, chastened but hardly finished. The defeat at Brudek hardened his resolve. In 1041 he returned with a larger, better prepared force, and Bretislaus was compelled to submit. Thus Brudek became not the end of conflict, but the prelude to a more decisive imperial intervention. From Brudek's woods we turn to England's throne, where Edward's crown is claimed, yet scarcely his own.